Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, another Tyranid Learning Curve video, and in this one we're looking at the Mawloc, which is my personal ultimate model from the Codex. Really love this model. Not only do I love the looks of it, I love playing it as well. So let's have a look. Stat wise, we're looking at weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 0, strength 6, toughness 6 with 6 wounds, initiative 4, 3 attacks, leadership 8 and a 3+ save. Now this model is 140 points, which I think is actually a pretty good still for this mini. It's one of those units which can do a lot of damage, but also if it doesn't do a lot of damage you haven't really lost that much, which is what I really love about it. Now it doesn't have synapse and it will feed. Now the feed table isn't that disastrous, especially for a single creature. It would allow you to burrow if you want to, which basically means if you have it on the table, from turn 2 onwards in the movement phase you're able to basically burrow the model, take it off the table, as long as you're not in assault. And then the next turn you'll automatically deep strike back down. It's pretty useful to have, but only being able to burrow on turn 2, which is slightly worse than it used to be. You used to be able to burrow on turn 1 and then automatically come out on turn 2. Well, now you burrow turn 2, come out automatically on turn 3. In my view, you might as well just deep strike it, because then you've got a chance of coming out on turn 2, especially if you can manipulate the reserves rolls with a little homing device or one of the HQ units. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend you burrow him at the beginning of the game, but it is quite a useful thing to be able to do during the game, to be able to burrow him, especially if you get, say, a bad mishap and your opponent places him in an awkward place. Assuming he's still alive, then in your next turn you can burrow him and then he comes out on the next turn after that from reserve. He has the hit and run special rule, which is always a nice special rule to have, especially on a unit which potentially might survive a close combat, which is quite oddly enough usually hit and run is on units that don't survive, which I find really odd, but anyway. And it has the Terror from the Deep special rule, and this is what the Mawloc is all about. Now you'll notice, especially if you've just watched my Trigon video, that stat wise, in terms of close combat stats, isn't anywhere near as good as a Trigon. You know, weapon skill 3, you know, just the 3 attacks. It's nowhere near as good, and the reason for that is that this isn't actually really a close combat creature. What this does, it uses the Terror of the Deep. That's its special rule. So basically when you come in from reserve you're actually able to deep strike directly onto a unit, onto a model, onto your enemy, which is straight away, that's great. What you do is you get your big large blast template and you put it onto the spot where you want your model to come through, and then every single model underneath the template suffers a strength 6 AP2 hit. Now assuming you don't scatter, you've got to get some decent hits on there. Now this will also allow you to, well, first of all, actually you're not allowed to do that on flyers or flying monstrous creatures that are obviously in the air. So ideally you want to be aiming for troops, especially those nasty troops, anything with a 2+ save. Hello Centurions, hello Terminators, you get my drift. And not only that, but they don't get a cover save either. So really great, assuming you don't scatter off. Now if you land on a vehicle, you'll obviously only get the 1 attack, but you will be going on the side armour of the vehicle, so that's something to bear in mind. Strength 6, side armour, not too bad, but it's not making the most of the model at all. Now, once you've resolved all of your attacks and all the wounds are done, if you're unable to place the model where that template is without being 1 inch away from your enemy, then you basically what we call double tap. So you redo it. So you just you take those strength 6 AP2 hits against any model still left under the template. Now after the second time, if you're unable to get this model down, now bearing in mind that the model base is smaller than the large blast template that you'll be using. So don't just use the large blast template to see if you can get him in or not. Actually take that blast template away and see if you can get it down. If you're unable to get it down the second time, then you have to roll on the mishap table. Now the mishap table's improved vastly and it makes this guy even better. So basically, unless you roll a 1, which means he will die, then it's not too bad of a result. On a 4, 5 and 6, you'll go back into ongoing reserves, which is, let's face it, it's the ideal result. On a 2 or 3, your enemy is able to place you anywhere on the table. Can be quite tricky for your enemy, especially if there's loads and loads of other units on the table that you've got. But of course they'll be looking either to put him out of range, but bearing in mind obviously you can burrow, or he'll be looking to put him in line of sight of his most powerful weapons to try and get rid of those 6 wounds. And although he has a 3+ save, of course without cover that is quite vulnerable to anything that's AP3. So all of those missile launchers and class cannons, etc. Makes him very, very vulnerable to those. That is basically how you're going to use him. Of course, he does have the Hammer and Wrath attack and all the usual monstrous creature attacks. And it can take some options. So let's have a look at the options. You've got Adrenal Glands, Toxin Sacs, Regeneration and Acid Blood. And it's one of those things really. It is a personal preference. Personally, I like to keep them cheap. I just keep them very basic, 140 points. It's not worth putting Adrenal Glands on there really. Toxin Sacs, possibly yes, lets you re-roll your fouled wounds. Regeneration, again that's situational and a personal preference. I don't tend to have regeneration because in my experience with the Mawloc is if you don't actually land on your target and you scatter off, 9 times out of 10 I'm usually not there the next turn. All of my enemy's firepower goes straight into this guy and he generally will die, usually 9 times out of 10 anyway. So that's why I don't tend to put regeneration on these. And Acid Blood, again, personal preference, I just don't tend to think it's worth investing the points. Now you do have the option to take a couple of towels, just like on the Trigon, so you can have your pincer towel or your toxin spike, but once again you're not really going to be close combating with this guy, so I just don't think it's worth the points. 10 points each, it isn't a great deal, but personally I just rather have them cheap, the best that I can, and just hope that I can get some good scatter dice rolls. So that's it in a nutshell. I personally think it's a great unit. So much so that I had 2 of them and I went straight out. I got myself another one because I think 3 Mawlocs coming down is really, really nasty. It's a really great combination and pretty cheap for what they can achieve. So I would definitely say give them a go. I would say if you're going to do it, I would go for 2 at least, 2 or 3 of these guys. Make it more themey. Which is what I do. I've got that lock list where it's totally 100% based around having 3 Mawlocs. Okay, so I think that's it for this guy. As you can tell, I'm pretty enthusiastic about him. He's not the be and end all in the Codex. The Trigon definitely has a better stat line, but for me, he's certainly probably the most fun model to play with, and I think it looks absolutely awesome on the table, and he is pretty scary. Yes, I love him. Of course, he is fully magnetised, this guy, so I can totally take all the bits and pieces off and change him up into a Mawloc Trigon Prime. I do have magnetising tutorial, so I will put the tutorial in the link in the description below, so go and check out that link if you're interested in that. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.